Okay, welcome back children. Now coming to the remaining part of the wave optics. In the previous part I told you about interference. Okay, now we'll be studying about diffraction and polarization. So what do you mean by diffraction? Okay, we know whenever light passes through a thin slits, it enters into the geometrical shadow region. Okay, this is a source of light. When you allow light to pass through a small slit whose size is comparable with the wavelength, then you observe that instead of traveling straight, it then bends across the obstacle and enters the geometrical shadow region. So this bending of light when it passes through the thin slits or across an obstacle is nothing but called as diffraction. And we have two different types of diffraction. One is Fraunhofer diffraction and the other one is Fresnel's diffraction. Okay, this is your source, slit and the screen. So if your source and screen are at infinite distance from the slit, then we call the diffraction as Fraunhofer diffraction. Okay, what do you mean by Fraunhofer diffraction? Source and screen are at infinite distance from the slit. Since source is at infinity, what type of wavefront will be incident on it? It should be a plane wavefront. In Fraunhofer diffraction, we use a plane wavefront because source is at infinity. Whereas in Fresnel's diffraction, source and screen are at finite distance from the slit. So the incident wavefront may be a spherical wavefront or it can also be a cylindrical wavefront. But anyway, we are only going to discuss about Fraunhofer diffraction. In single slit experiment, we have done that. So in single slit experiment, what did we prove? We have observed that in diffraction, the nature of fringes is of non-uniform width and non-uniform intensity. So if you observe intensity versus wavelength, that means path difference diagram, what are the conditions we have proved for a single slit experiment? If the path difference, okay, we know we write the path difference as d sine theta. So this is a source. Okay, I'm just showing you the single slit experimental arrangement. Width of the slit is d and somewhere here you have a screen. Source is generally kept at the focus of a converging lens. This is focus, so that we get a plane wavefront. If this wavefront travels without any bending, again we use a lens here to converge the beam. The beam would converge exactly at the center. This is your plane wavefront. If the wavefront bends across this obstacle, the bent wavefront I am representing it as AC. Extend the rays, they would converge at some other point. This point P may be bright or dark depending on this angle of bending. Okay, this bending will decide, because if I drop a perpendicular, BC gives you the path difference. If the size of the slit is taken as d, what is path difference? D sine theta. This will give you the path difference. And if you equate the path difference to n lambda, we have proved that if d sine theta is equal to n lambda, this is the condition for diffraction minima. Okay, hope you remember, by division of slits. Okay, diffraction is obtained by the interference of secondary wavelengths coming from the same wavefront. Whereas interference is because of the interference of sources or lights coming from different wavefronts, from two different sources. But here only one source, the secondary wavelengths emerging from one part of the slit and another part of the slit will interfere and give you the diffraction pattern. And we have already proved that if d sine theta is n lambda, this is the condition for diffraction minima. And if d sine theta is 2n plus 1 lambda by 2, this is the condition for diffraction maxima. Okay, remember these two conditions. For maxima, it is 2n plus 1 lambda by 2, and for minima, it is n lambda. N takes values from a 0. When you put n equal to 0, we get the central maxima. Okay, now find out how will be the nature of intensity versus path difference graph. based on these relations, if I plot intensity versus path difference, okay, we observe that central maxima has highest intensity. As you go for higher orders, intensity gradually decreases. This is 0, lambda, 2 lambda, 3 lambda on either sides. And this is the point where you are getting the first maxima. This is central maxima. Okay, here we have second maxima. And how do you name these points as first minima, second minima, and so on. So in case of interference, all of them, all the fringes are of uniform intensity. But here you observe that intensity is not same. It is gradually decreasing and reduce it to 0. And how do we determine the intensity of various central bands? Okay, let's look into the formula. What is the formula for variation of intensity of this diffraction bands? I is equal to I naught. I naught is the intensity of the central maxima into sine alpha by alpha whole square. Okay, where alpha is nothing but pi into d sine theta. We know d sine theta is the path difference divided by lambda. Okay, observe this relation. It is half of the path phase difference. Half the phase difference. Okay, we know phase difference is 2 pi by lambda into path difference. So what is the path difference in case of diffraction? That Fraunhofer diffraction, it is d sine theta. And if you put this value of alpha here, this expression is going to give me intensity of various bands. Okay, say for example you want to know the intensity of first maxima. What is the path difference for first maxima? We know maxima condition is, this is the condition for maxima. For first maxima, put n equal to 1. When you put n equal to 1, d sine alpha or d sine theta will be equal to, okay, when n is 1, is it 3 lambda by 2? If you know d sine theta is 3 lambda by 2, put 3 lambda by 2 in the place of alpha. You can find out what is the intensity of first maxima. So like this you can change the value of alpha and find out the intensity of various fringes. So you observe that in diffraction, intensity of the fringes gradually decreases, whereas in sustained interference with waves of two same intensity, that means if intensity of the interfering waves is same, okay, you will get the intensity 4i and 0 alternatively. So remember this condition. Okay, regarding applications of diffraction, okay, we have seen that using diffraction you could find the limit of ray optics. Okay, so before going to the limit of ray optics, tell me what is the width of central maxima. If this is your source or the slit, this is the width of central maxima. Distance between two first minimas will give you the width of central maxima. What is the width of central maxima? We have two widths, linear width, angular width. What is linear width equal to? Linear width is 2 times of lambda capital D by small d, where lambda is the wavelength of the light which we have used in diffraction, capital D is the distance between slit and the screen, and small d is the size of the slit. And what is angular width equal to? 2 lambda by d. Observe the difference. Angular width is independent of capital D. Angular width does not depend on distance between the slit and the screen. Even if you double the distance, angular width is not going to change, but linear width is going to vary. So based on this also you may get some applications. And coming to the limit of ray optics, okay, what is the limit of ray optics? Say if your source is here, slit is here whose size is d, and this is your screen. So if you keep on moving the screen closer and closer at one particular distance called Fresnel's distance, light will travel linearly without any diffraction effects. And we have proved that this Fresnel's distance, okay, how do we get the Fresnel's distance df equal to? It is d square divided by lambda, where d is the size of the slit. So if the distance between the slit and the screen, capital D, is less than this Fresnel's distance, then we need to apply which optics? Ray optics. Fresnel's distance is the limiting distance for application of ray optics. And if you keep the distance greater than this Fresnel's distance, then we need to apply which optics? Wave optics, because diffraction effects become prominent. Within this distance, it will travel like a straight line. Beyond this distance, wave optics is applicable. So if I put df as d square by lambda, so from here, I can write it as, if capital D is less than d square by lambda, which optics is applicable? Ray optics. Or, if you further modify this relation, if small d is less than square root of, not less than, greater than lambda into capital D. See, I have written in terms of d square. D lambda should be less than d square, or d should be greater than under root d lambda. Then this is the condition for applying which optics? Ray optics. If the size of the slit is less than square root of lambda into d, then we can apply which optics? Wave optics. This is what we keep on telling you from the beginning. Okay, wave and interference and diffraction become prominent. Wave characteristics become prominent when wavelength is related to the size of the slit according to this relation. So this is the limit of ray optics. Coming to the concept of resolving power. Okay, we know what is resolving power of an optical instrument. It is the ability of an optical instrument to separate two closely spaced point objects. Okay, say we have two objects which are very close to each other, and if your instrument is going to magnify and separate them, then we say the resolving power of the instrument is high. And according to Rayleigh's criteria, there should be some minimum distance between two objects to be just resolved. Okay, when do you call it as just resolved? If this is the minimum distance between two closely spaced objects, and when it passes through the objective lens, you are getting the diffraction pattern such that the maximum of the first one coincides with first minimum of the other. Okay, if I number this 1 and 2, the maximum of the first object is coinciding with the first minimum of the second. Then this is said to be just resolved condition. And if the two objects are just resolved, okay, this is the image of the first object, and this is the image of the second object, which is magnified. Okay, we say that they are just resolved. Now, what is the condition for just resolution according to Rayleigh's criteria? Rayleigh's criteria says that if you have two closely spaced objects placed near the objective, okay, if these are the two closely spaced objects, then this can resolve them into two separate objects provided the angle theta, okay, I will call this as d minimum. If this angle, if I call this as d theta, what should d theta be equal to according to Rayleigh's criteria? It should be 1.22 lambda divided by small d. Okay, we call this as Rayleigh's criteria. Okay, the two closely spaced objects will be just resolved if it subtends an angle d theta equals to 1.22 lambda divided by small d. So this was actually proved by Rayleigh. That's why we call this as Rayleigh's criteria for resolution. Okay, this is the Rayleigh's criteria. And based on this Rayleigh's criteria, okay, we have calculated the resolving power of microscope and telescope. Tell me, what is the resolving power of microscope and telescope? Okay, I am not going to show you the derivation here. The resolving power of microscope comes out to be, resolving power is 2 mu sine theta divided by lambda. Okay, this is your objective lens, and somewhere here you have the object. Generally we keep it close to focus. This angle is called theta. Okay, so if this angle increases, resolving power will increase. That means to increase the value of theta, I have to increase the size of the lens. So how is resolving power related to the aperture of the lens? directly because it's proportional to sine theta. If I increase the diameter or aperture of the lens, resolving power will increase. And here mu represents the refractive index of the medium between the object and the objective. So that is the reason why for microscopes, okay, if you keep the object inside a medium, resolving power will be high. So mu is the refractive index of the medium between the object and the objective of the microscope. 2 is a constant. Actually it should be 2 mu sine theta by 1.22 lambda. But in some cases we neglect this 1.22 and take it as equal to 1. But actual formula should be 2 mu sine theta by 1.22 lambda. But for which instrument? Microscope. Because microscope has to do two things. It has to magnify as well as resolve. Whereas coming to telescope, okay, reciprocal of this. What do we call the reverse as? Limit of resolution. Okay, reciprocal of resolving power gives you limit of resolution. Then for a telescope or human eye, okay, we give angular resolution. Okay, so here limit of resolution, we write it as d minimum. Okay, it is not angular resolution, we are giving distance here. Whereas for telescope and eye, we give you angle. Okay, what should this angle be? Resolving power. D theta is the resolving, limit of resolution. Angular resolution. Reciprocal will give you the resolving power. So the limit of resolution for a telescope as well as human eye, we use the same formula, is 1.22 lambda by d according to the Rayleigh's criteria. If you reverse the fraction, we get resolving power. So what is the resolving power of a telescope or human eye? It should be d by 1.22 lambda, where d is the diameter of or the aperture of the eye, diameter of the eye lens, and lambda here will give you the wavelength of the light used. So how is resolving power related to wavelength? Inversely. Decrease the wavelength, resolving power will increase. So remember these two formulas for evaluating the resolving power. But remember, for telescope we give the limit of resolution as angle. For microscope it is distance between two closely spaced objects. And here this mu sine theta, this is called numerical aperture. Okay, what is the value of mu into sine theta called as numerical aperture. So these two formulas, on this you get questions directly, okay, based on limit of resolutions. Okay, now coming to polarization. Okay, we have studied that polarization is confining the electric field vector into a particular plane, is called plane polarized light. Okay, we have different types of polarization like circularly and elliptically polarized light, but here we are only going to study about plane polarized light. Okay, so how do we represent an unpolarized light? It has electric field directed in all possible directions. This is a representation. Or you can also write it this way. Electric field has more than one direction. Dot indicates electric field vector is perpendicular to the board, and this indicates electric field is on the plane of the board. So if electric field vector has more than one direction, we call this as what type of light? Unpolarized light. So the method of converting this unpolarized light into polarized light is called polarization. So how do we convert unpolarized light to polarized light? It can be converted by reflection. Second is by refraction. Third method is by scattering, okay, which naturally occurs in atmosphere. So how is reflection going to produce a polarized light? If this is a medium, a denser medium, mu1 and mu2, if you incident an unpolarized light on the surface of a denser medium such that the reflected and refracted rays, if they are perpendicular to each other, okay, this is a refracted ray and this is reflected ray, then Brewster observed that reflected ray is completely polarized. and this is partially polarized. So this is one method for getting a polarized light, and we call this angle of incidence as angle of polarization. And we have proved the Brevester's law. What is tangent of angle of polarization equal to? Is it mu to 1, refractive index of the medium? And this equation we call it as Brevester's law. Okay, what do you call this relation as? This is called as Brevester's law. So you get some applications based on Brevester's law. So tangent of IP is equal to mu to 1. Then coming to reflection, polarization by refraction. Okay, we know by using double refraction, calcite crystals can split the incident ray into two, ordinary and extraordinary. And by using calcite crystals, we have constructed a Nichols prism. Okay, and what does this Nichols prism do? Okay, by using the calcite crystals, we represent it this way. This is the axis of the crystal. A Nichols prism, if you incident an unpolarized light whose intensity is capital I or I naught, will give you a polarized light. Okay, by making use of Nichols prism, you can get a polarized light. And intensity always reduces to half when unpolarized light is converted to polarized light. Okay, this is called polarization by which phenomenon? Refraction. Polarization by scattering. Okay, in scattering it is observed that if the location of position of the sun, okay, this is the surface of earth, if the line of sight of vision of a person is perpendicular to the incident light, then this person is going to receive completely polarized light. Again I repeat, if this is the line of sight of vision of a person and this is your incident ray, and if they are perpendicular to each other, then the person receives, the scattered light received by the person, okay, scattered by the particles of atmosphere, is completely polarized. Okay, it is a part of reflection itself, but because it is absorbed by the molecules and remaining light is coming out, it is called polarization by scattering. So these are the three methods what we have studied for polarization, that is to get a plane polarized light. And here in plane polarized light, remember one law which is called Mollou's law. What does Mollou's law tell you? If a polarized light passes through a polarizer, this is called a polarizer. Unpolarized light gets polarized when it passes through a polarizer. And if polarized light is again incident on one more Nichols prism, this is called analyzer. The intensity of light emerging from analyzer is always equal to the intensity of incident polarized light, that is I naught by 2. Remember, I am writing this as I naught by 2, whatever you are incidenting, into cos square theta. Okay, where theta gives you the angle between axis of polarizer and axis of analyzer. If they are inclined, put the value of theta. Again I am repeating, this is unpolarized. First intensity reduces to half. Second one, if this is a polarized light whose intensity is I naught by 2, the intensity of the transmitted light will be incident intensity into cos square theta. And based on this, you will get a number of applications. Instead of giving two Polaroids, they may give you 3 Polaroids and ask. Or the question can be like this. Okay, I have 2 Polaroids in crossed position. This is first Polaroid. Incident intensity is I naught, which is unpolarized. Another polarizer is crossed position. Crossed position means angle is 90 degrees. Now you have added one more polarizer, making an angle theta with the first one. Okay, if it makes an angle theta with first, second and third will have an angle 90 minus theta. So tell me, what is the intensity after coming out of the first prism? If it is unpolarized, it reduces to half. And from this to this, apply Moll's law. I naught by 2 into cos square theta. This is emerging from second. This becomes incident for the third. What is the light intensity of the light emerging from the third polarizer? I naught by 2 cos square theta into cos square. What is the angle between them? 90 minus theta. So the intensity of the transmitted light is I naught by 2. I naught is the intensity of unpolarized light, cos square theta into sin square theta. Okay, you can express it as in terms of sin 2 theta if you want. Otherwise, you can leave the answer like this. So on polarization, mainly you get questions either on Brewster's law or related to Moll's law. And we know what can produce polarization. Only transverse waves can produce a polarized light. So polarization proves the transverse nature of electromagnetic waves or transverse nature of light. So can sound be polarized? No. Sound is a longitudinal wave. Longitudinal waves cannot be polarized. Okay, so this is all about polarization of light.